Imagine walking into a bar for a quiet drink, only to be confronted by off-duty cops who think they can intimidate you. What happens when they realize they've picked the wrong people? Stay tuned to find out how. Two black twins turned a dangerous encounter into viral justice. What happens when you're confronted by off-duty cops who think they run the place, but they've picked the wrong people? This story proves arrogance meets real consequences. Friday night at Danny's Tavern carried the familiar hum of country music, clinking glasses and low conversations. But beneath the dim lights, tension was beginning to thicken like smoke. Daniel and David Thompson, 34-year-old twins, sat at a small table near the center of the bar, barely touching their beers. They had come for a quiet evening, nothing more, but that peace was about to be shattered. Officer Brett Coleman's voice cut through the music, sharp and forceful, accompanied by the shuffle of his two colleagues as they formed a semicircle around the twins' table. "Hey, you two, I think you better get out of here before things get complicated for you," he said, resting a hand on the edge of the table, his presence aggressive, demanding, dominant. Daniel's eyes didn't rise from his bottle. Calm, relaxed, almost unnervingly composed, he asked softly, "Is there a problem, officer?" The words carried no fear, no hint of submission, and it was a tone that Brett didn't notice, though his partner, Rick Torres, felt a subtle unease. David, sitting beside his brother, finally lifted his gaze, meeting Brett's eyes with a serenity that was chilling. There was no panic, no threat, only the careful patience of men who had seen far worse and survived. Brett leaned in, hands on the table, voice lowering to a menacing growl. "The problem," he said, "is that this isn't exactly the kind of place for people like you. You know, we don't want any trouble." Trouble? The word hung in the air like a challenge. David's calm stare never wavered. "Trouble?" he murmured. "We're just having a quiet beer." The youngest officer, Jake Morrison, visibly drunk and overly confident, laughed harshly. "Don't you get it? This bar is ours, our turf, and we don't like suspicious characters around here." Some patrons turned discreetly, others pretended not to notice, all sensing the silent escalation. 3 off-duty police officers confronting 2 black men over nothing more than presence and perception. Daniel and David exchanged a single, fleeting glance, a microsecond of communication that carried years of shared experience. Every flashback, every lesson learned in hostile situations, every instance of being underestimated because of skin color or circumstance compressed into that half-second. Brett had no idea that this moment of quiet assessment was far from submission. It was strategic calculation. Daniel cataloged every detail. Brett's exposed right side, Rick's hand hovering near a gun he wasn't legally required to carry while off duty, and Jake's staggering steps, overconfident and drunk. David measured distances, noted camera angles, and identified the exit, while quietly observing the bar owner's discomfort as she watched the tension rise. Brett slammed his palm on the table, rattling the twins' beers, attempting to impose authority through intimidation. "You're leaving now," he barked, "and you'll thank me for being in a good mood today." Daniel's mind flashed back 15 years, to a time when he and David had been stopped for no reason, humiliated, and made to obey out of fear. But those boys were gone. Men now stood in their place, trained, confident, and patient. "You know," David said softly, drawing out the motion as he opened his wallet, "it would be interesting to see your IDs. Just to make sure you're really police officers, right?" Brett's face turned red. Rick placed a cautious hand on his shoulder. "Man, let it go," he whispered. "They're leaving." Jake, fueled by arrogance and alcohol, poked David sharply in the chest. "You think you can come here on our turf and act all cute? We run this town." Daniel's voice, smooth and calm, carried an edge that caught Brett off guard. "Interesting that you should say that," he said. Brett shoved Daniel's shoulder. The bar went silent. Music faded into the background. Daniel and David rose at the same moment, synchronized, movements sharp but controlled, athletic builds barely contained by their casual shirts. "We're leaving," Daniel said quietly, "but you're going to regret how you handled this situation." Brett laughed, overestimating his authority. "We'll see who regrets it when I decide to search you outside," he taunted. David's calm eyes never left his. "You have no idea who you're talking to," he replied, voice soft but laden with certainty. The twins stepped toward the door, Brett and his colleagues in tow. Daniel paused at the threshold, a final chance to de-escalate. "Back down and apologize," he said, his tone carrying the subtle weight of command. Brett puffed out his chest, uncomprehending. Daniel smiled, not with anger or defiance, but with the dangerous patience of men who had already won in their own calculations. "Or nothing," he said. As they exited into the dimly lit parking lot, the bar held its collective breath, unaware that the next minutes would redefine their lives. But inside, Daniel and David moved with a quiet confidence, an unspoken agreement that they were no ordinary patrons. Every step, every glance, every pause was deliberate. The night had begun as a simple Friday outing, yet for Brett Coleman and his companions, it was about to become a lesson in humility, strategy, and consequences they had never imagined. The tension from the bar escalates outside. 3 arrogant cops think they're in control, but the twins are trained for this moment. Watch closely. The parking lot at Danny's Tavern was nearly empty, lit only by the flickering glow of aging streetlights. Daniel and David Thompson stepped out deliberately, calm and composed, their movements precise, measured, the kind that betrayed nothing yet revealed everything. Brett Coleman, his face red with rage, shoved Daniel against the hood of a parked car, the cold metal pressing sharply against his back. "You think you can walk in here anywhere like your equals?" Brett spat, his breath heavy with whiskey. His hand trembled slightly, betraying both anger and uncertainty. Jake Morrison, staggering from alcohol, circled David with a baton raised. "I bet you have drugs," he slurred. "You always do. Time for a thorough search." His laugh was harsh, cruel, meant to intimidate. Rick Torres lingered close by, hand hovering near his firearm, torn between instinct and loyalty to his colleagues. But for the twins, years of experience had distilled into calm, controlled observation. Daniel's eyes tracked every step, every twitch, every angle, calculating exactly how to maintain distance and safety. David mirrored him, noting escape routes, observing weight shifts, and timing reactions as if the world were a battlefield and they were soldiers reading the terrain. Daniel reached slowly into his pocket, pulling out his phone in a single fluid motion, holding it steady as he began recording. "Attempted assault with a blunt weapon against an unarmed civilian," he narrated calmly, his voice steady despite the chaos. Jake lunged forward, swinging, but David's movement was minimal, barely 2 centimeters to the left, and the baton sliced through empty air. Every motion was economical, precise, born of countless hours in hostile zones where hesitation could mean death. Daniel stepped back, keeping perfect distance, his phone capturing every illegal gesture, every reckless overreach. Luis, the bartender, appeared at the back window, phone in hand, documenting the scene silently, adding another layer of evidence that Brett could not anticipate. "Careful what you say," David murmured softly, still unmoved. "Some words can't be taken back." His tone was measured, authoritative, the kind that commanded attention without raising his voice. Brett's frustration intensified. "We're the police," he bellowed, swinging between threats and justification. Rick, sensing the shift, whispered urgently, "Brett, man, I think that's enough. They're leaving. Let it go." But Brett's arrogance clouded reason. The twins' calm demeanor began to chip away at the officer's confidence. Daniel's hand moved with subtle efficiency, capturing every swing, every misstep. David mirrored him, keeping perfect posture while recording, his eyes never leaving the intoxicated Jake. Then, headlights from a black SUV cut through the darkness. A woman stepped out, her posture commanding, a badge in her hand. "Because I am Assistant District Attorney Lisa Monroe, and I just witnessed 3 police officers commit at least 7 documented crimes," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. Brett staggered, trying to regain control, but the calm authority of her presence made him hesitate. David's quiet smile betrayed the recognition of an ally. "Prosecutor Monroe, long time no see," he said, voice calm, his composure unshaken. Daniel stepped slightly forward, shoulders squared, exuding the silent authority of a man trained to command men in combat. The three officers, drunk, aggressive, and overconfident, suddenly realized they were entirely outmatched, not by brute force but by strategy, preparation, and presence of mind. Jake's baton wavered as he attempted one final intimidation, but his drunken balance betrayed him. Daniel and David coordinated silently, their actions synchronized, movements minimal but devastatingly effective in demonstration of control. Every angle, every camera, every observer now ensured that their response would not only protect them but document the officer's misconduct in real time. Luis, from the bar window, and Daniel, from his phone, recorded everything. Evidence accumulated, faster than Brett could comprehend, the weight of legality and morality stacking against him. "You have exactly 1 minute to apologize and leave," Daniel warned calmly, voice carrying over the night air. Brett laughed, disbelief mingling with intoxication. "Or what?" he spat. David's gaze locked onto him, calm, cold, precise. "Or you'll—" "Find out," he said, voice low, almost pitying, "that there are very specific consequences for corrupt police officers who harass trained military personnel." Brett's expression flickered between confusion, anger, and dawning realization. In that dimly lit parking lot, the balance of power shifted entirely. The twins, who had entered seeking nothing more than a quiet beer, now controlled the narrative. Every misstep of the officers was being documented, every illegal action recorded, every witness present. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and the unspoken understanding that for the first time, arrogance would meet discipline, hubris would meet experience, and recklessness would meet consequence. And in those final moments before the world would see the evidence, Brett Coleman and his colleagues understood, too late, that they had misjudged the wrong people. What started as a parking lot confrontation becomes a viral sensation. Watch as these corrupt officers face consequences they never imagined. Within hours of the altercation at Danny's Tavern, the videos captured by Daniel, David, and Luis had flooded social media, tagged relentlessly under "You corrupt cops exposed." Clips showed the aggressive shove against Daniel, Jake Morrison swinging his baton at David, and the repeated verbal harassment by Brett Coleman, each frame crystal clear, undeniable. People from across the city and beyond watched with growing disbelief, outrage, and a sense of vindication for anyone who had ever been intimidated or abused by those meant to uphold the law. Notifications exploded. Shares multiplied. Comments poured in. Witnesses who had previously remained silent suddenly found a platform to amplify their voices. The twins, sitting in the hotel room adjacent to the bar, monitored the spread in real time. Every upload, every share, every reaction reinforced what they had already known. The officers had underestimated them, and the consequences were now magnified far beyond the dimly lit parking lot. Luis, at the bar, continued recording from the safety of the back window, capturing the final moments of confrontation, the panic and hesitation etched on the officers' faces. The footage showed clearly how the twins had maintained control, without raising a hand in violence, how they had calmly documented illegal behavior, and how the officers' arrogance had led to their own undoing. Lisa Monroe, arriving at the scene minutes after the confrontation, had already begun compiling evidence. She reviewed multiple angles from the twins' phones, Luis's recording, and the tavern's security cameras, which had fortuitously captured the full sequence of events. Witness statements were gathered immediately, each corroborating the twins' accounts, each providing a stark contrast to the officers' false narrative. Monroe, calm and precise, explained to the shocked officers that their actions were not only morally indefensible, but legally indefensible. Harassment, assault, abuse of authority, and misconduct were just the beginning. Each violation was meticulously documented, every law they had broken amplified by the clarity of evidence. As the videos went viral, media outlets descended on the story. Television stations, newspapers, and online publications dissected the footage, replaying moments of arrogance, incompetence, and intimidation. Experts weighed in on protocol violations, social commentators highlighted systemic issues, and viewers demanded accountability. The narrative was simple yet powerful. 3 officers, drunk and overconfident, had harassed 2 civilians, who turned out to be decorated military personnel trained in the most elite branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. Public outrage was immediate. Calls to the police department flooded in, questioning how such blatant misconduct could occur unchecked. The story ignited a national conversation about authority, accountability, and bias. The officers themselves began to realize the scope of the storm. Brett Coleman, Jake Morrison, and even Rick Torres watched helplessly as their professional lives unraveled. Badge numbers, full names, and faces were displayed across countless platforms. Each comment, each post, each news segment added weight to their growing disgrace. The power dynamic that had seemed so firmly in their favor that night had collapsed entirely. Emails, notifications, and phone calls from superiors began arriving, confirming what they feared. Federal authorities were taking notice. Investigations were opened not only at the city level but also involving federal oversight, ensuring that the incident would have far-reaching consequences. Lisa Monroe took a commanding role in coordinating the immediate legal response. She presented the collected evidence, the multiple angles, and the witness statements with precision, leaving no room for ambiguity. She emphasized the pattern of behavior, the reckless abuse of authority, and the documented assault. Each video reinforced the twin truths. The officers had acted illegally, and their victims were not ordinary civilians. They were men trained to handle life-or-death situations with composure, strategy, and restraint. Monroe's methodical approach ensured that the legal foundation for accountability was unassailable, and the implications extended far beyond a single night. Within hours, the city began to implement immediate measures. Internal reviews of the police department were announced. Oversight committees were engaged. Discussions of policy reform and officer accountability gained urgency. The viral nature of the footage meant that public scrutiny was relentless. Every comment from the department, every statement from the officers, and every press briefing was dissected and debated. The story had become more than a confrontation. It was a symbol of systemic corruption, of the need for public oversight, and of the capacity for ordinary citizens to hold the powerful accountable when evidence was irrefutable. By nightfall, the magnitude of exposure was undeniable. The officers' reputations were shattered, their careers teetering on the edge, and their actions broadcast across media platforms nationwide. The viral dissemination of evidence ensured that no reinterpretation, no denial, could erase the truth. The narrative was clear. Arrogance, ignorance, and abuse of authority met the consequences of documentation, strategy, and restraint. The public, now fully aware of the misconduct, demanded justice. Systemic corruption was being exposed not through rumor or accusation, but through clear, unassailable proof. As the Thompson twins and Lisa Monroe observed the unfolding situation, the implications of their calm, calculated responses became clear. What had begun as a tense confrontation in a dimly lit parking lot had escalated into a viral lesson on accountability. Corrupt behavior, once unchecked, could no longer hide. And in this exposure, the story revealed a broader truth. Vigilance, evidence, and courage could dismantle arrogance and force the powerful to answer for their actions, proving that justice, when pursued correctly, was unstoppable. When arrogance meets competence, consequences are inevitable. See how the Thompson twins turned dignity into victory and changed lives forever. In the weeks following the viral exposure of the incident at Danny's Tavern, the repercussions for Brett Coleman, Jake Morrison, and Rick Torres were swift and unrelenting. Their careers, once bolstered by the authority and perceived invincibility of their badges, crumbled under the weight of documented misconduct. Suspensions without pay were immediate, and federal investigators scrutinized every arrest, every report, and every complaint filed against them over the past decade. The officers' financial stability evaporated alongside their reputations. Homes, pensions, and personal relationships, all tied to the illusion of power, were suddenly precarious. The consequences of arrogance, magnified by indisputable evidence, became painfully real. Meanwhile, systemic change began to take shape within the police department. Internal affairs reviews, long overdue, uncovered patterns of harassment, abuse of authority, and illegal conduct. Dozens of officers faced suspension or dismissal, and previous cases tainted by corruption were revisited. Victims who had suffered in silence finally saw justice. Wrongful convictions were overturned, financial compensation was issued, and apologies were delivered. The viral incident had not only punished the perpetrators but had ignited reform, reshaping the culture of an entire department. It became clear that the courage of the few, documented and shared, could inspire accountability on a grand scale. Daniel Thompson's career advanced in parallel with the public reckoning. Promoted to major, he now oversaw ethics training programs for police forces in 6 states, imparting lessons not only in discipline and operational excellence but in integrity, respect, and the proper exercise of authority. His lectures emphasize that respect is earned, not demanded, and that competence must always be paired with humility. Daniel's experiences, both in military operations and that tense night in the parking lot, provided powerful teaching moments, illustrating that ethical decision-making under pressure could prevent tragedy and restore trust. David Thompson took a different but equally impactful path, consulting for the Pentagon on military-civilian relations. He worked to develop protocols that strengthened cooperation between armed forces personnel and local authorities, ensuring that incidents of harassment or abuse could be mitigated through awareness, communication, and proper accountability. His photo appeared on the cover of national publications, representing the embodiment of calm authority, strategic thinking, and the capacity to influence systemic change. David's work not only safeguarded the rights of service members but also reinforced the principle that those in positions of power must exercise their roles responsibly. Luis, the bartender who had documented the unfolding events, leveraged the attention to grow his business. His bar, once a quiet local establishment, became a model for responsible oversight and transparency. Luis expanded to multiple locations, training his staff to recognize, document, and report abuses of authority while maintaining discretion and safety. He fostered a culture in which silent witnesses could no longer be passive. By equipping ordinary citizens with knowledge and tools, he contributed to a broader movement of accountability and vigilance. Lisa Monroe's role in the incident propelled her into the public eye. Recognized for her decisive intervention, meticulous handling of evidence, and unwavering commitment to justice, she was elected Chief District Attorney with overwhelming support. Her tenure focused on rooting out systemic misconduct, improving transparency, and ensuring that the law protected all citizens equally. Monroe's rise underscored a central truth: competence, courage, and integrity often translate into meaningful change when aligned with opportunity and evidence. As the dust settled, the Thompson twins reflected on what had been achieved. Their calm, strategic approach, the same patience and assessment that had guided them in military operations, had not only safeguarded their own dignity but had catalyzed reform, punished corruption, and restored faith in justice. They had turned a personal encounter into a larger statement. Arrogance, prejudice, and misuse of authority cannot withstand disciplined intelligence and principled action. For Brett Coleman, the lesson was brutal and unavoidable. 6 months later, he served coffee at a roadside diner, stripped of his badge, pension, and public respect. Jake Morrison sold insurance over the phone, his confidence shattered, and Rick Torres worked nights as a security guard, haunted by the collapse of his career. The irony was inescapable. All the trappings of power he had relied upon were meaningless in the face of competence, character, and documented truth. The Thompson twins' story became a blueprint for integrity in action. Their measured courage, tactical patience, and insistence on evidence transformed what could have been a personal altercation into a national lesson on justice, dignity, and accountability. It proved that competence, when paired with ethical resolve, could dismantle arrogance, inspire systemic change, and ensure that the powerful answer for their actions. Arrogance always loses to competence. Prejudice always falls before character. In the end, justice was not merely served, it was made visible, repeatable, and instructive. The twins had demonstrated that the most effective response to abuse is not only to protect oneself, but to transform adversity into reform, turning the weight of confrontation into a catalyst for broader societal change. Their victory was quiet yet profound, a testament to the enduring power of dignity, strategy, and integrity in a world often blinded by privilege and hubris.